You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. Be sure to smash that like button. With a little bit of an asterisk, LSU is going to lose a little more than a handful of guys to the NFL draft early. Now, there were guys who had more eligibility but were seniors. For example, Mike Jones was a senior, but could have come back for a super senior season, a sixth year. Same with Micah Baskerville. Those guys elected not to do that. But I'm going to exclude them. I'm going to talk about the underclassmen who've decided to leave early here and declare for the draft. Let's start on the defensive line. And you lose 3 of your 4 starters on the defensive line. Jaquelin Roy was the most recent to jump into the draft. And here's what Brian Kelly had to say about Roy during the season.
I think Jay Roy is really steadied himself in terms of, what he's done on a day-to-day basis, on the practice field. Look, he was banged up a little bit earlier in the season and had some back issues. And, I thought there was some inconsistency early on, but he's really steadied himself to give us really good play here down the stretch.
What if I told you Jaquelin Roy had more tackles this season than Mekhi Wingo? Would you believe me? That's a fact. That actually happened. 49 for Roy, 47 for Wingo. Now, Wingo did have the 6 tackles for loss to 3.5 for Jay Roy. And Wingo also had 3 sacks as opposed to half a sack for Roy. But it seemed like Wingo just became a more consistent player. But the production for Jaquelin Roy was there this year. As it was on the edge with B.J. Ojulari, who was the heart and soul of this defense for the majority of the season. Of course, wore the number 18. Here was Brian Kelly on 18.
He's a leader by example. He works hard, does the right things on and off the field, sets a great example. So, when you're talking about culture change, when you're talking about standards and doing things differently, you need a couple of guys early on that kind of set that example by the way they do things. He was one of those guys for me that early on just was all in. And then, obviously, he plays so hard, doesn't take plays off. Go back to the Auburn game where he came up with a strip sack that changed the momentum of the game. It was a leader's kind of play where effort was needed in the time in the game where we needed a big play, and he stepped up.
8.5 tackles for loss for B.J. Ojulari this past season, 5.5 sacks. And keep in mind also that Ojulari only played in 11 games. He missed 3 games this year when he was battling some injury early where they sat him against Southern. So he had opportunities to stat pad in other instances when he didn't do it because for his own health, he sat. I think B.J. Ojulari is a guy who, we talked about him when he declared, phenomenal player, phenomenal leader. He's going to go to the Combine and wow, not only because of his physicality, but also with the way he carries himself. And I think he's going to go make himself an awful lot of money at the Combine. I'll say the exact same for Ali Gay, who was another guy who was such an important glue guy for this team. Here was Matt House on Ali Gay.
I think number one is length. He's a good speed to power rusher. When he uses that elite length along with the speed, he can generate so much power, and the torque he generates on a tackle can just be different. From just a mentality standpoint, the guy loves to be taught, and that's big.
Now, the interesting thing is that, Ali Gay had a really nice season. He had 6 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, 36 tackles on the season. But he did see Savion Jones nip at his heels and, quite honestly, take a lot of reps from him as the season went along. But still, this was Ali Gay's most productive season and the only season where he stayed healthy for a full season and played in 13 games, whereas a year ago he played in just 4 before the injury. So, Ali Gay leaving now is certainly the right decision for him. As a guy who's going to try his hand at the NFL with a little left to prove. Jay Ward is an interesting one because he's as versatile a defender as LSU has, but you feel like there's probably still a little more meat on the bone in college for him had he come back. Here was Brian Kelly on Jay Ward.
It's one that allows him to be in the action. It allows him to, play close to the football, play man coverage, be a lot more aggressive. He's an aggressive player. He's a really good tackler. And I think it really suits his skills. And since we've made that move in week 2, he's really played well for us. And obviously, SEC Defensive Player of the Week this past week, he was he was all over the field. So I think it was really about putting him in the right position. He played a lot of deep safety, post safety in the first week, and although he's certainly capable of doing that, we feel like the best position for him was moving him down to the nickel position.
Yeah, and the thing about Jay Ward, of course, in the bowl game, they kicked him out, and he played outside cornerback because they needed him there. We've seen him play deep safety as well. He's a versatile guy who's going to be able to play on special teams as well, and I think hopefully will be an early day 2 pick if he can climb that high. But Jay Ward was 6th on LSU's team in tackles this year with 62.5 for loss. He had the 4 pass breakups. They needed him to be physical in the box, and he was this year. Such a huge part of this defense. So Jay Ward is off to the NFL draft. On the offensive side, really where you're losing guys is your 2 receivers with Jure Jenkins and Kayshon Boutte. Let's start with Jure.
Yeah, I would say the one word that stands out is consistency. You know, he's been consistent each and every day, practice-wise, his preparation. He's bigger, he's stronger. You know, we made him a game day captain for us on offense because of that, and you know, obviously it showed in the game as well. So yeah, he's been really good. And again, I would say that there's a lot of depth certainly, and there's a lot of really good wide receivers, but he has really done a great job of singling himself out with his consistent play.
4th leading receiver on the team with 27 catches for 404 yards and 6 touchdowns. A guy who kind of like all he did was catch touchdowns. But Jure Jenkins ends his LSU career with being noted for some really big moments, like we've talked about the game winner against Texas A&M, the touchdown, deep ball against Florida, the touchdown against Florida State. That would have tied the game had they made the PAT, but Jure Jenkins is off to the NFL draft, as is Kayshon Boutte, who his career is going to be remembered like many others for the flashes of brilliance, but maybe the unrealized full potential. Brian Kelly did talk about Kayshon Boutte earlier this year.
Yeah, I had a conversation with Kayshon, and his standard is so high. And he's going to have great games. And it's going to be in the totality of his work that he's going to be evaluated. You know, he hadn't played in a while. He'd been out with an injury. Maybe there was a little rust there. He's the least guy that I'm concerned about on our offense.
Oddly, a guy that wore number 7, had such an incredible second half of his freshman season, had a great first half of his sophomore season before he was injured, and then this year certainly rode that roller coaster ups and downs personally and on the field as well. But even still, Kayshon, despite playing just 11 games, was your 2nd leading receiver. You realize that? I mean, behind Malik Neighbors, who had 72 catches for 1,000 yards, Kayshon had 48 for 538. He was 2nd on the team in receptions and in receiving yards, despite missing 3 games and, at times being a bit absent in the offense. It goes to show you what his potential is if he can realize it. The good news for LSU, obviously, is you are loaded at the receiver position and the defensive line position, where we just talked about losing 3 of your 4 starters. Not only did you get Mason Smith back, but you reloaded there in the portal out of necessity. Where LSU might have been weak, they've certainly addressed that. It's a beautiful illustration of roster management that Brian Kelly and his staff have done so far. Again, the one name who we have not yet heard a final decision as of right now is John Emery. But my understanding is when they were down in Orlando, the staff was preparing for John Emery to leave early. I think T-Bob and I talked about this on Whiskey and Wine after the bowl game. So much so that they were already doing their due diligence in the portal, scouting running backs that they might target. I was even given a name. But short time after the bowl game, we saw the announcement from John Emery that he was re-upping with Gordon McKernan for his NIL opportunity. And as I'm told, it's their understanding that John Emery is going to return, which is why they were willing to do that deal. Waiting on a final decision from John Emery. But boy, if you return John Emery, who's your most dynamic back, you get Josh Williams healthy, you get Armani Goodwin back healthy as well. You add Noah Cain for a senior season to the mix, and you bring in the 2 freshmen. Now all of a sudden you got a really deep room at running back. Maybe still missing the big, bell cow home run hitter. But that might be the second biggest news of this offseason besides Jaden Daniels coming back if John Emery decides to give it another go here for the Tigers. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.